Our panel will focus on developments in international investment dispute settlement, EU, European Union, and Israeli perspectives. We will start with some greetings.
We joined forces in this project together with the Israeli Association for the Study of European Integration and the Friedrich-Ebert Foundation. Special thanks go to our own Rachel, Dr. Rachel Fried de Vries, the organizer, the living spirit behind this event. So, success to all of you.
Europe and Israel are strong partners in terms of trade, in terms of investment, in terms of creativity, in terms of innovation. So there's a lot of potential and a lot of very good cooperation, which is very often overlooked when you just read the newspapers in Israel about the political tensions which do exist between Europe and Israel.
I'm very happy that we are having now the 4th year of partnership with the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, and very grateful to the Academic Center Kərmel for hosting this meeting. We have always sought to expand and diversify the venues of our meetings, and indeed this is the first time we arrive here, and I'm very happy to see an impressive crowd of people who turned up and are interested in, hopefully, in not allured by the food, but also by EU studies.
When I started working on this topic about 12-15 years ago, nobody was interested. It was quite depressing, but there were no conferences, very few publications, nobody wanted to hear about this. And in just over a decade, this topic, investment law and investment arbitration, has not only led to a lot of academic debate, a lot of political debate, but has captured the imagination of the broader public in a way that is quite unseen for something as technical and boring as investment law, at least as it was used to be seen. One sentence about the multilateral investment court system, of course, it would make more sense rather than having one of these ICS systems for each treaty to have a multilateral one. But this is more a dream for the future, and I think this is also something that, and now it comes to the importance for Israel, that Israel should think about, not just be a rule maker, not a rule taker, but a rule maker, and to help decide how this reform, because there will be a reform, but how exactly this reform will take shape.
I argue that B2 negotiation is a growing trend, and as I mentioned, it's probably going to continue, so this is something to continue and explore. And we see that governments respond to disputes and for changed circumstances. And perhaps one of the interesting things is that our analysis show that we tend to think that governments always respond by increasing their flexibility and sovereignty, and this is not what we find. We actually find that many times, at least in the 90s and even in the last 10 or 15 years, governments still are updating their treaties and bringing more investor protection. Despite all the discussion of backlash and legitimacy crisis and so on and so forth, we don't see it, at least in terms of how governments act. And this is, I think, an interesting gap between the discourse between lawyers and NGOs and what governments do. So as I said, the evidence, at least from this analysis, that the evidence for backlash is relatively limited. Of course, I only talked about investor-state dispute settlement provisions. I didn't talk about substantive provisions at all, and it's not clear that what we see in ISDS, we will also see in substantive provisions. But as I said, we continue to code and continue to do analysis, and next time I'll present it, I'll probably have more to say about other issues, but that's it for now.
Israel is party to 36 IAs at the moment, mostly BATs, with a variety of countries, 12 members of the EU, as was mentioned by Dr. Baetens, as well as India, China, Thailand, Colombia, and currently, and many more. And currently we're negotiating with Japan and Vietnam, South Korea. It should be mentioned that to date, Israel has not been brought to arbitration. It's not been sued under any of the beats that it has. Now, moving to implications or consequences to Israel. I can say that the consequences could most directly arise, as Dr. Baetens also mentioned, through should the EU countries with which we have BITs ask to amend, renegotiate the older BITs, or should the EU come to Israel with a proposal to negotiate a comprehensive BIT between the EU and Israel? This would probably have to be considered, bearing in mind that the EU in several publications mentioned that from now on the ICS mechanism is the mechanism that will be incorporated in all BITs and IAAs, etc.
I'll start with just a short comment on Dana Daybog's comments. You mentioned that Israel hasn't been sued yet, luckily, but there's a reason to that. The reason is that Israel until now has signed BITs mainly with developing countries, and these countries are not capital importing countries. I mean, they're capital importing countries, they're not capital exporting countries. We don't exactly expect to get foreign direct investment into Israel from Ethiopia or Estonia. But I think we should look at it in a different way, not if we may be sued or not sued. I think the more important thing is that maybe time has come to use BITs as a tool to attract investment. We used to think in the past that this is something you only sign with poor countries. And if we're going to sign it with the United States, it means that we are the poor country. We don't want to look like the poor country. We want to be the developed country. We have this great legal system and a rule of law. We don't need this stuff. But here you see that United States and the European Union are signing an agreement like that. We have the TPP, which wasn't mentioned today, which also has an investment chapter, which is with Australia, Japan. You have all these developed countries. Nowadays, developed countries sign them and they use them as a tool to attract investment. Now, I want to say a few words about Dr. Baetens' interesting and very timely article, and I agree with most of your points of criticism against the current proposal. In favor of the proposal, I will also add that, judging from the experience of the WTO, the World Trade Organization, I think there's a great potential contribution to the proper development of international investment law and to combat the fragmentation that we've seen in this fact. If you have one, International Supreme Court of International Investment Law, that will help very much to develop the law in a unified manner and contribute much to the field, I believe. This is what we've seen in the WTO also.
Okay, good afternoon. I would like to address several matters in Dr. Baetens' article, and I think most or some of the points that the ICS addresses and that you address in your articles are matters that are currently addressed by the private international arbitration institutions. For example, if you look at the attempt to make the proceedings more efficient, then the ICC President Alexei Moria announced, I think it was 3 months ago, that he will institute penalties on arbitrators who work slow. And the private market and the private international arbitration market is addressing those matters. It takes time, but they are being addressed on a day-to-day basis, and I assume that as in the same manner that special arbitration rules were put in force in the ICC, in the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce, in the LCIA, then you will see those rules, those new initiatives go around and will probably get to ICSID at some point. So on the one hand, I understand the importance of tackling those issues, but from my understanding and from my perspective, there is no need to deviate from the current system in order to tackle those.